Hello, I'm Robert, fact checker and science blogger and helping people who are scared of COVID-19, amongst other things, for our Facebook group Doomsday Debunked. And this time it's about the UK's isolation period of 7 days for COVID-19. And if you are in the UK, then the WHO never directly criticised the government, but I'm a citizen of the United Kingdom. It's perfectly within my rights to say that my government is wrong. So I'm not going to disobey what they have said. So I don't mean in that sense. I think like they've told me to stay at home and only go out for half an hour a day for exercise, so that's what I'm going to do. But I think it's good to encourage other people to continue to abide by things like that, as long as it's not actually harmful and if it's what the government says. So, but this 7 days thing, this is actually quite harmful. And so we've just had Matt Hancock, and at least if you accept that the WHO are right, then this is quite risky behaviour. So the UK says that if you have the symptoms of COVID-19, they won't test you if you only got the mild symptoms. If you feel better after 7 days, then you could go and leave your house. You don't need to worry about infecting anyone else. But the WHO have a completely different message. The WHO say people infected with COVID-19 can still infect others after they stop feeling sick. So these measures should continue for at least 2 weeks after symptoms disappear. And visitors, if you're self-isolating in your house, visitors should not be allowed it until the end of this period. So if you are self-isolating at home and you've got someone else in the house and you don't want to infect them, then you should self-isolate until you feel completely better, and then for another 2 weeks. And you should be very careful not share the cutlery. If possible, use a different bathroom. You should actually take quite a lot of precautions, but the main thing is it's not easy to transmit it to someone else. And the other way around, if there's someone in your house who's got COVID-19, you should regard them as being infectious all the way through. So I think we should regard the WHO, take the WHO guidelines. So the UK can hardly complain if someone is staying at home for 7 days and they say, I'm going to stay at home for 3 weeks instead. And apart from essential work, then apart from doctors and nurses, there it's difficult because they've got to go back to work. And they might be infecting people if they've got COVID-19. But that's the situation, and so it's absolutely clear. This is the UK advice, 7 days. And if you're living with others, then they say that the others have to stay at home for 14 days in case they got it. They assume that the others in your house got infected at the same time you did, right at the start of the isolation period. So their 14 days is a quarantine to see if they get it. And then if you've got 7 days, then they regard you as being okay after that 7 days. So I was just rereading this again. If you've got infected, then you can leave after 7 days, but the rest of your household has to stay behind for another 14 days, and that's like their quarantine. This is not what the WHO say at all. And so this is risking infecting others. Now, the easiest way out of all this, if you're in the UK, is just not get the disease at all in the first place. Then you won't need to worry about this pesky thing that they're asking you to stay at home for too short a period for the quarantine period and the isolation period. So to protect yourself, as I say here, that it seems to be only transmitted by the larger droplets that fall out of the air in seconds. You only produce those if you cough, sneeze or talk. You don't need a mask. You can cover your mouth with your elbow if you can remember, or you can use a simple cloth to protect your mouth. It doesn't need to be a surgical mask. All you're doing is collecting these droplets, and then not touch the front of it, but tight around the back. We want to leave the surgical mask, which you do not need, for other people, for the frontline healthcare workers. And you definitely don't need a respiratory, those respiratory thingies. But if you're looking after someone at home, they do recommend a surgical mask for both you and a person with COVID-19. And that you've got the detailed instructions which you can look up if you're in that situation. It's in my article, I linked to it. So what you've got to do is you've got to stop it coming into your eyes, nose and mouth, and you've got to stop that either directly from the droplets, some coughing, sneezing or talking, or from you touching a surface that they have coughed, sneezed and touched, and then getting into your mouth, or eyes or nose. So anyway, that's a quick summary, and I've talked about it so many times, but I can hardly stress it too much. And so why have they said such a long infectious period? Well, for SARS, for instance, the viral is detected for a month, and it is viable for 3 weeks. So this 7-day period doesn't fit SARS. The 7-day period fits flu. It doesn't fit SARS, which was infectious for 3 weeks. Of course, I have lots of study of SARS, that's a decade ago, so we can be pretty confident about that. And for COVID-19, then the duration is from 8 to 37 days. This was in one particular study. The median duration, so half of the people who had COVID-19 continued to shed virus for 20 days. So that's getting on for 3 weeks. Not that different from SARS, but this is just, they don't know. I think there's now papers as well about how long it's viable for, but this is just the viral shedding without testing to whether the virus is still viable. And in fatal cases, it continues until death, all the way until they die, then they're shedding the virus. And then the other thing that happens, look at this diagram, is that this is a infector-infectee pair. So this is when the infector got symptoms. The person they infected could get the symptoms up to 10 days before they did. Now, for flu, you're infectious only 12 hours before. For COVID-19, you're infectious certainly for several days. And remember, this is when the symptoms start. And this person who got it 10 days before this one got symptoms. So this is the person they were infected by. The way this works is that when they find the symptoms, then they do contact tracing. They ask this person, who have you been in touch with for the last fortnight? And then they go back and they find all these people, said, oh, I was in touch with Joe Bloggs of 10 days ago, or I had dinner with so-and-so, or whatever. Then they go and tell that person to quarantine until they get symptoms, or for 14 days from when they could have been infected. So at this point, if this person has just been found now, so in actuality they would probably be found a little bit later than that, then they would go back to 14 days before they were infected, so right back to then, and then this person may have been isolated, even that far back, and then the onset of symptoms was then. The onset of symptoms was then they were infected by this person, obviously before then. So you are quite infectious. In fact, about 1/8 of the infections from a person who got symptoms then happens before they had symptoms, and some of them back to 10 days before. This is why contact tracing is so important. So this person is infecting now, then they could have infected other people right back to 10 days before. It's too late to catch this person at that point. So you can only get the ones they're going to infect later, so some of these were infected after they got their symptoms. Some of these could have been infected before. So you only get the ones who are infected after. But you then go and get all their contacts. So this one who got the symptoms 10 days ago, and then this one who had onset of symptoms just now, and then this one onset then, and this one onset lots later. So at this point, this is the only point at which you know where all the contacts are. You go and chase them all up, and some of their contacts won't have symptoms until then. And so this person here, for instance, could have been infecting others for all that time. So that's why you don't wait until they have the onset of symptoms. You get the onset of symptoms is the only clue, and you find this person and the index case or the first case in the cluster, and then you go back in their history and find the people they've been in contact with, and not people in the same house. It's not airborne, not people in the same building, not people who they shared a hotel with, not people who they were on a plane flight with. Well, they do a bit of that if they're very close. But the people that you want to look at are people that they were talking to for at least a quarter of an hour or something, that they were in direct contact and doing something with together, or there was very close contact. And so you go back for the last fortnight, if you're being very thorough, at least for the last 2 or 3 days, best the last fortnight. You find all their contacts, and if you catch these contacts really early on, so this person here, obviously, there's all sorts of different people. So, but if someone infected there, they infect someone else there with symptoms there, they got infected back then, sometime. So, and there can be up to 14 days before you get the symptoms. So, if you go and catch all the people that they've been in contact with, you can trace them many days before they develop the symptoms. They are isolated. If you're doing this properly, if you've got the tests available, you test them every single day to see if they've got COVID-19 yet. And then you catch them on the very day, and that's why the Chinese found so many asymptomatic cases, pre-symptomatic cases, most of them. They kept testing them, and then they found some of them days before they eventually developed the symptoms. And then a small number never developed symptoms, but 3/4 of them eventually do develop symptoms. And that is how of the asymptomatic ones, and then you get the ones you only detect them when they develop symptoms. So not everyone is infectious before, but some only when they develop symptoms. In fact, I think most of them only when they develop symptoms, but you get this that they're infectious before they develop symptoms. So you're going to catch those. And maybe more. So that is why you've got to do the contact tracing. That's why it is not enough to just quarantine, not just isolate. It's not enough to just go around, find everyone who's got it, and isolate them. There isn't much point in trying to quarantine an entire household, because the chances are that most of the people in your household haven't got it yet. And the Chinese priority was that if someone got it, they actually removed them from their households. For this very reason, that many of them are not going to be infected until maybe a week later or 2 weeks later. It's very different from flu. You do not infect the entire household. It's got a very, very long infectious period. Some people do infect the entire household. There were occasions where one family stayed with another one, then they went away, they only spent a day together, and all that other family got it, but maybe partly from each other. And if you crowd people up together and you don't take them away from the family, they're going to infect other people in the family. So the Chinese, as their top priority, was to go around, find the cases, and remove them from the family. And they didn't isolate them at home. They isolated them, and that's one of the reasons why they had big stadiums with all those beds that you saw. Most of those were mild cases. They're just feeling around flu or cold. Some of them maybe even not that ill at all. And a lot of their work was just stopping them from getting bored. but they had to keep them away from their family until 2 weeks after they got better. So the Chinese had large numbers of people in community centres and stadiums and so on, in vast numbers of beds, and eventually it would have been completely better, and just having to spend time in a community centre or hospital because they had to be kept isolated if they had COVID-19. So we should be doing that. In the United Kingdom, as our top priority, we should go around all the households where the people with COVID-19, find them, test them, check it is COVID-19, take them out of the household. You only have them in the household, and the WHO recommendation is that you can isolate in a household as a last resort if you don't have anywhere else, if you've run out of space of anywhere else to isolate them. And in that case, you should have a clinician visit the household to check that the household is correctly set up to make it possible. So you've got a separate bedroom, a separate bathroom ideally, that the people understand the instructions. You give them masks, they know how to use the mask, they know to wash their hands. Once you are sure of all that, then the clinician would say, okay, because we've got a lack of bed space in anywhere else, and we're having to isolate people at home, then you can isolate at home. Please be very careful. They would make sure it was someone healthy that looks after them just in case they got it. And they would tell them to take a great deal of care. So this is what we should be doing in the United Kingdom. And because we're not doing that, and the people who are at home, who are isolating, sort of isolating, but they're quarantining their entire household with them, on this basic assumption that it's like flu, and that you're going to give it to everyone. That is just not true. Not for COVID-19. So if you're in the United Kingdom and someone in your household has COVID-19, your top priority actually is not to keep them in the house, because there's very little community transmission, although we should just go along with the government. We should, it's not a good idea to give an example to others of going out and doing something different. And it is good to reduce the very, very small chance of community transmission. Certainly, it's going out for a walk, and not coughing and sneezing, not talking to someone. It's not airborne. All these instructions that they're saying you should stay 2 meters apart, even just walking past someone in the park, even just walking in a shop, they say you should stay 2 meters away from everyone. That is based on this false assumption that the virus that infects you with COVID-19 is airborne. You will not get it from breathing. So what you have to be sure is to stay 2 meters away from someone who is talking to you, or someone who is coughing and sneezing. You do not need to worry about just walking past someone in the street 2 meters in less than 1 meter away from them. The problem is that our government's policy is being guided by academics who are not looking at the experimental data. I explained in one of my other videos that they're a bit like the supersymmetry theorists for particle physics and for astronomy, where they have this beautiful theory of supersymmetry, and there's almost no data. There isn't any data that really confirms it or denies it, and so they just don't need to look at the data, except kind of try and work out ways that they might possibly be tested. And these people who are guiding the UK government, then they behave like these supersymmetry theorists. They're all caught up in their models, which are beautiful models, which are based on flu and on past data from flu, and they're simply not looking at the experimental data like what I just explained. They just haven't looked at this data. Literally, they don't seem to be aware that this data exists. They don't seem to be aware that SARS was infectious for 3 weeks. I don't know how it's possible for this to happen, but you get these people talking and saying it's infectious for a week, and they don't even mention that SARS is infectious for 3 weeks. I mean, did they not know that? Have they never read any of the research on SARS? It would seem they haven't. And So here are some of the key differences, as I said, that the virus that causes COVID-19 is not airborne. Most transmission happens in the household, and nearly all the cases from cases that show noticeable symptoms at some point, and the quarantine period is completely wrong. I just don't understand. The quarantine period is correct. The isolation period. The quarantine period is 14 days. That's the incubation period. They do get that right. But the isolation period is just completely wrong. Or the idea of how difficult to infect. COVID-19 does not infect easily. It infects for a long time pre-symptomatically. It infects for a long time post-symptomatically. And it makes up for being very difficult to transmit by being infectious for a very long time. And that is why you can stop it with isolation and contact tracing, very rigorous contact tracing and quarantine. So I hope that some of you watching this begin to understand why it is so very, very important to do rigorous contact tracing. And the alternative, because of this vast, long, pre-symptomatic period, is to test absolutely everyone. So that is another way that is even faster. Contact tracing plus quarantine is a fast way to reduce, and it reduces it down as fast as it went up if you do that rigorously. And you end up with whatever. So the United Kingdom may have as much as, might easily have 300,000, could even have 500,000 cases by now, because they are, if you look at the ones who are infected, not yet diagnosed, and depending. So as you can see from what I just said, the UK's instructions, they also are not stopping it in hospitals. So we have 1.2 million NHS staff, and it is well possible that a high fraction of those are getting it, along with the patients in hospitals and then at home, and they're not really doing anything to prevent that. Their focus is just on trying to test them to see if they've already had it, and if they've already had it, to let them go back to work, and if they are being confined because of flu instead of the COVID-19, to let them go back to work. They're not focusing their attention on testing the health workers in the right area. The UK government should be focusing on testing the health workers that are working in hospitals and testing the patients in the hospitals, because they may well have very mild symptoms, they may be pre-symptomatic, and they may be several days pre-symptomatic, and yet still be infecting other patients, other doctors, other nurses, and the people, other people who work in the hospitals, the cleaners, the office staff, and so on. They may all be getting infected, and the UK government has no way to know, because they don't test for mild cases. And the quick way to completely clean up all our hospitals and NHS would be to test absolutely everyone, all those 1.2 million NHS workers, the health workers, and all the others, the cleaners and the office workers and the receptionists. They should all be tested for COVID-19, symptomatic or asymptomatic. That is the very fastest way to stop this. That's even faster than contact tracing. You could combine the two, and that might be a bit faster still, but the very fastest way. So if we can ramp up to 1 million tests a day or more, and put as much effort into that as we put into building hospitals and intensive care units and sourcing new ventilators. So there's a big push to get ventilators, intensive care units. This is very, very important. But it's also equally important to ramp up the diagnostic tests. And the United Kingdom government just hasn't a clue as to how important this is, because they're basing it on this simulated fluoride hypothesis. That's the WHO's fact check that COVID-19 is not airborne. So I hope this helps some of you to understand the extreme importance in contact tracing and in testing in order to isolate. And if you can test everyone, symptomatic or asymptomatic, then that's quite a good substitute for contact tracing. So it's one or the other, or both. And ideally you do both, especially focus on the hospitals or something as the absolute priority to completely test everyone, symptomatic or asymptomatic. The pre-symptomatic ones that are still infectious. Infectious means they're shedding virus, they can be detected. These people can be detected, these ones. This case was shedding virus back then, and they can be detected. So we should be, but they would be asymptomatic. They haven't got a cough, they haven't got a fever, but they're shedding virus. That's just the way this does. It doesn't trigger the fever and the cough straight away. You can be shedding virus for quite a long time before you have any symptoms. So they have to go around. So the ideal way, if you really want to stop it very quick, find all those people that are going around hospitals and things shedding virus without any symptoms. You just need to do the PCR test and test them and find them. And that is what we should be doing as a top priority. And if you don't have enough tests, then you test all the ones with mild symptoms, and then you will likely find certain outbreaks here, there and the other. You'll find that such and such a hospital in such and such a city has got a big outbreak of COVID-19. Then you would test everyone there, symptomatic or asymptomatic. Anyway, I'm not, obviously I'm not the right person to direct policy. I'm just giving you the ideas of the maths behind this. I have a good understanding of maths. That was my background. I got a good first-class degree in maths, and I understand very well mathematics and modelling and things like that. It's not my own area, but the maths behind this is very simple for me. And so that's the main way that I can help you all. And please try and get people to understand what's going on here. Anyway, so I'll upload this. And so if any of you are interested in, if you want to join the Doomsday Debunking Face group, then to understand if you're just reading and not taking part, it doesn't matter. But if you are going to comment or post, please read the rules at the head of the group. We welcome everyone, especially scared people, and also anyone who's good at reassuring people who are scared, and people who are good at fact-checking, and good people who are good at presenting things in easy language for people. And if you're good at talking to people who are autistic, who need very simple, direct language, not so much simple-minded, you can have very high vocabulary, but very straightforward, direct constructions, and not using much metaphor, and not using hyperbole and kind of flowery language, as I put it, not using hyperbole, not using metaphors, and just being very direct and straightforward and simple. The people who are the most in the autistic spectrum, which is obviously a wide range of different things, and some of them even have difficulty with tenses, not very clear idea of tenses, and not very clear idea about how one sentence joins onto the next. If you've got several different sentences, again, could have very high vocabulary, they could have very high technical knowledge. They're often very good at focusing on things. It is not a disability, it is a different ability, very focused. I've got a good article about that, well, a useful article that people say is helpful, about the non-autistic people are like chimpanzees, and they, I'll talk about that maybe separately, it's going on a bit, but they're like chimpanzees, and they just love kind of socializing and with other people, and everything is in the socializing. And if you have a chimpanzee, if they were like us, they could talk and think like us, and if they were left on their own, they'd be imagining faces in every single bush and they wouldn't be very useful they wouldn't be much use on their own. Whereas the orangutans, then they are very solitary creatures, and they're perfectly happy spending days and days on their own, just going away doing their thing, and very focused. And you give it to orangutan a job to do, and it'll just do it, and it's not interested in anything else. Not looking at another orangutan nearby. It's not bothered unless it's sort of some territory thing or something. The orangutan has got a very different, very focused. And in the past, the hunter-gatherers were the people who go out hunting for long distances. They would be like the autistic part of our society. And the people who more socialising at home, they'd be like the chimpanzee part. So we needed both. And still in our present society, we need both. They are different abilities. Anyway, there are a lot of people in our group who have the autistic ability rather than the non-autistic ability, and they require very simple, direct language, because many of them do not pick up on social nuances, and so advanced but direct language. You don't need to dumb down the vocabulary at all. And they may have very sophisticated understanding of things, but the kind of convoluted social niceties, and you're saying things in order to make people feel better and to encourage them and so on. These sort of things we do so much in ordinary language, then that can be very confusing for an autistic person who just literally doesn't know what you're saying. They can't read any meaning into it. They're looking for the meaning, and they don't see it. And then they might find things that you didn't mean to say, because they literally can't see what you're trying to say. So again, we find it's very useful. If you're used to talking to autistic people, that's very useful in the group as well. Very, very, very helpful. And that's part of the reason why we've got all these rules at the head of the group. Anyway, I just gave you an extra few minutes on that, so I didn't mean to talk about that, but there we go. I did. So now I'll stop.